Okay, welcome. Everybody here knows who I am, Anni Crofut, Susie Crofut's daughter, Ben's stepdaughter, beloved Art Center fan. And I am here today to obviously talk about chronic pain and the mind-body connection. So it's a relevant topic. 52 million Americans every year struggle with persistent pain and are on some level of assistance or disability. 1 in 5 people. This is obviously a super important topic. So I'm going to divide this, next slide. I'm going to divide this talk into 3 parts. I'm going to tell my story, which is both my personal story of an experience with persistent pain. I'm going to use persistent pain, and I'll explain why later. And then a story with our son. And in the second part, what is mind-body pain and why do we have it? A little bit of the science. And in the third part, I'll share Dr. Ratner's column system, which I am trained in. I'm a mind-body coach. And then hopefully we'll have time for some questions and answers. So next slide, please. My own mind-body story. So when I was in my 20s, I had some jaw issues. I had some clicking. When I was on the swim team in college, and I would take a stroke, and sometimes my jaw would lock, which was not fun. I was grinding my teeth. I had tension around that area. And I wound up in my 30s, it got pretty bad, going to a postural orthodontist who gave me braces for 2 years, had me in all these appliances. He promised, he said, oh, your condyle is all worn down, your teeth are flat, you know. He said, this will help you. And it somewhat helped, yes?
You said something about a postural orthodontist. What is that?
He's an orthodontist, but he looked at your teeth from a postural perspective.
You mean
So,
how they line up in your mouth?
how they line up with your spine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Interesting work, actually. And I do think it helped, but it didn't really substantially stop my grinding or this pain that I was having. And then I went to consult with a couple of surgeons who both said, you're going to have your jaw broken, surgically broken, and you're going to have your teeth wired shut, and you're going to have to drink through a straw for 6 weeks as you recover. 2 of them. So this planted an enormous amount of fear in me. And then I got to my mid-40s, and it was really bad situation. I had so much fear, I was grinding, and I went to Thailand to see a healer. And it's not sort of the eat, pray, love, ponytail Asian healer. He was this California guy who wore Hawaiian shirts and had a mustache. And his story was that he had fallen off a horse in his 20s and spent a lifetime of studying different modalities to help him recover. And he was a remarkable healer, and I'd heard this. So I already had sort of buy-in that he might help me. First thing he did is he said, open your mouth. He looked at my mouth. He said, you're fine. He said, you're fine, and you're going to be fine. By the end of this week, you're not going to have any problems. And I'm like, okay. And he said, look at my mouth. And he had this wicked crossbite. And he said, how do I look? I said, not so good. And he said, that's right. And I have no pain, and I have no problems. So I'm like, okay. So by the end of that week, he did a lot of intraoral fascial release work. And by the end of that week, it was true. And I went back to where we were living in Bali, and I have had no issues, no grinding, no pain ever since. So that's hope story number 1. The next story is about our son. So he was 21 when COVID hit. He came home, and like all kids, he went from this sort of vibrant life in New York. He had his friends, he had a job, and he came home to the isolation of the beautiful Berkshires, but still for a 21-year-old, it was not great. And 9 months after he got home, he started to have pain above his right eye. You can go to the next slide, Hildy. Quick! So this pain was alarming. It was very strong. And pretty quickly, you can go to the next slide, Hildy. Oh, actually, is there one slide before that?
Yeah. Go back.
Go back one. Pain and behind the eye, you see? Okay, this is for you, so, as an artist. So it was alarming. So we went up to an ENT in Pittsfield. The ENT did an x-ray, said, oh, you have a minor deviated septum, but it's not enough to cause that kind of pain. Here's some antibiotics, go home, take the antibiotics, maybe you have a sinus infection. So he did, and it did nothing. Then we went up to the neurologist up in Pittsfield, who did an MRI to rule out the tumor. And I just want to be clear as I'm starting this talk that this was an important step. This is in no way meant to suggest anything anti-modern medicine. It's absolutely necessary, Amy. And it's life-saving. So this is not anything. Everybody who works with somebody going through persistent pain or mind-body symptoms should have that person medically vetted first to rule out anything serious. So I just want to be clear about that. So we did rule that out. He didn't have a tumor, and this man said, I'll give you a nerve block in the back of your neck. Maybe that will help. Well, it didn't help. Then we moved on to, you can go to the next slide. So we've been to the GP, the ENT, the neurologist. So then we move into the alternatives. And he went to massage, he went to a chiropractor. I had had such success with myofascial release. He went to a clinic in Pennsylvania for 2 weeks, and he did that. And these things did actually give him some relief, but it was temporary. So, not yet, actually. So what I want to pause there and just say, I want to look at how the different practitioners responded to my son and to us. The medical doctors essentially said, we can't find anything structurally wrong, and beats me. Don't know, as far as we can tell, you're fine, go home. The alternative doctors or practitioners were much more holistic, and they saw more of the whole person, but their responses were like, have faith, be patient, journal, meditate, and come back to me for more treatment. Which wasn't bad, it's nothing bad, but the point is that none of them understood the source of his pain. So, by now the pain was spreading down his neck, behind his ear, down into his arm, and we went to an unconventional postural dentist, similar to the one I had been to, who took a battery of images and came up with a theory. And her theory was that he had this forward head because of his deviated septum and because he had had heart surgery as a child that was pulling his head forward, that was sending his jaw back, pinching his trigeminal nerve, that was sending pain to his head, down his arm. It was a theory, and it was something. And we were desperate, and we were said, great, we got something to hold on to. So right away, we booked him in for surgery for his septoplasty. And he went, and you can, next slide. So he had the surgery, and about a week after the surgery, what became clear was that he was in crisis. He was suicidal. He was severely dissociated. He was in a sort of constant constant panic attack, very shut down though. Couldn't reach him. So this was extremely terrifying for Mel and I. And we proceeded, okay, let's see, not yet. So quickly we went into action. Found him a psychiatrist in Manhattan. She prescribed Lexapro and benzodiazepines for his anxiety, which helped for 3 hours at a time or 4 hours at a time. We tried to get him into an inpatient program because we were way out of our depths. Mel and I just didn't know what to do. And he had insurance in New York, so we found one in New York, and they accepted him. And the next day they called and said, sorry, he has a medical issue. So there's a conflict for liability purposes. We're a mental health facility. He has a medical issue. And that led to hospitalization. But maybe go to the next slide. Because where we were at that moment is what I call the black hole. It's the hole between medical and mental health, where there is no help. It's a huge gap in our system. And Mel and I really were not equipped. We had dropped our work, we had dropped our social life. Fortunately, we had each other, we have a good marriage, we were somewhat resourced, but imagine people who don't have those things. And he was suicidal day by day. So we really thought we could lose him. And then his suicidal ideation turned to an action plan, and he told us he had an action plan. And by the way, I just want to be clear, he has given me permission to share this story. It's important to say that. Because he's hopeful that it will be helpful to people. It's actually, obviously, making me emotional. So, of course, that was an emergency. We rushed him into New York City. We went to Columbia Emergency Center, and he was put into Gracie Square psych ward the next day, where he spent 10 days. Now, during those 10 days, what happened, there are two things that happened. One is Mel and I finally had the time, and we did a deep dive on YouTube and discovered this burgeoning field of mind-body medicine. And we discovered Dr. Ratner, who I'm going to tell you about. That was the first thing. And it was a huge relief for us to have some kind of understanding of what's happening for our son. The other thing that happened is that he had 2 days where he had no pain in the hospital. Suddenly, all of his symptoms lifted. He felt completely fine. Mel went in to see him, and he's like, I'm completely fine, Dad. I want to go home. I'm done. I'm better. Well, that's not how psych wards work, because they're changing your meds, and they got to keep you in and monitor you and all this. And so, of course, it's a harsh place, and in the next few days, he reverted all the way back. Everything came back. And also, he wasn't guided. He didn't have any understanding of what was happening. And psychoeducation is a huge part of the healing for mind-body symptoms. And he didn't have any, and we didn't have any. So, but we had found Dr. Ratner. So, when he got out, he had an appointment with Dr. Ratner, and that was the beginning of the change for him and for us. And I'm going to pause there. That's the end of the first section, because I'll kind of, when I explain this, then you'll start to see how he was able to recover body pain and why do we have it. So actually, the word pain is actually not sufficient. I used it because it's a hook and it gets people. But pain is one mind-body symptom, but there are many, many mind-body symptoms. Musculoskeletal issues, back pain, many muscle aches and spasms, carpal tunnel, TMJ, tennis elbow, plantar fasciitis. And there's more I'm going to say, but just to pause there, because it's a very interesting thing, is that, you know, you can, when you have a child, you can name your child, let's say you name them Hannah, and you think you're the only person that gives them the name Hannah. And then it gets to first grade, and you find there's 6 kids in their class named Hannah. You're like, how did that happen? Well, mind-body symptoms actually can come in and out of vogue in the same way. It's a kind of an unconscious zeitgeist. So for a while, TMJ and carpal tunnel were very in vogue. And that's kind of passed through. And now, plantar fasciitis is all the rage. So, just interesting. Chronic fatigue and systemic issues, fibromyalgia, headaches, chronic Lyme, arthritis, digestive issues, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, heartburn, skin issues, eczema, rashes, allodynia, which is sensitivity to touch, hives, itching, neurological and mental issues, tinnitus, blurred vision, slow processing speed, foggy brain, anxiety, depression, lack of energy, sleep issues, insomnia, fatigue, having trouble staying awake, and many, many, many more. This is just a short list, but just to give you a sense. So, next slide. So, I'm using the phrase mind-body symptoms, But there's many other words to describe this that you may or may not have heard of. TMS, tension myositis, was a term coined by Dr. Sarno. I'll talk about him later. Psychosomatic is sort of very familiar to everybody. Stress disease, because stress plays a part. Somatic symptom disorder, chronic pain, perceived danger pain, neuroplastic pain, and then Woody Allen's favorite, hypochondriac, which is way outdated and rather stigmatizing, so we don't use that. And one thing I want to point out is there's a certain words here that Dan, Dr. Ratner, who I studied with, tries to avoid. And those include disorder, syndrome, disease, and chronic. That's why I'm saying I use persistent pain, because what chronic and syndrome and these other words do is they kind of like a sentence, like you're stuck with it, you'll never get over it, and this is a message of danger to the brain, which is a large source of why we have this pain, when the brain is feeling threatened or in danger. So language is very important. Okay, so just giving you a little historical perspective. So in the 1600s, Descartes, that lovely philosopher, French philosopher, he put forth his philosophy of dualism of mind and body, that they're separate entities, and even though they're connected, they're distinct. And this has shaped our entire medical system and our approach to disease and illness as largely physical processes that really doesn't take into account the nature of the brain and the power of the brain to affect our experience and our body's experience. So thanks to him, we have the miracles of modern medicine. We have these incredible tools of diagnosis and treatment. So there's a good side to it. We can rule out tumors and severely damaged joints and cancer. But the majority of our ailments actually fall into the mind-body category. So just to back up a little, I want to kind of elicit from you what some everyday pedestrian mind-body experiences are. And I'm going to get you started with blushing. We have an emotional response to something we say that's embarrassing, and our capillaries on our skin get flooded with blood, they get red, and we feel hot. Can you give me any others that you can think of?
Yawning.
Yawning, yes, exactly, yes. Any others?
Gritting your teeth.
Yawning, well, yawning is an interesting one because yawning is bringing more oxygen in. It's also a stress relief. If you yawn, often it's a release of stress. And so if you're feeling stress and you yawn, that can be actually an assist to your physiology. But it has several functions. Yawning is an interesting one. Anything else?
Gritting your teeth.
Gritting your teeth, yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Grinding, yes.
Grinding, yep.
Shaking.
Shaking, yes. In fact, shaking's a really interesting one because there was a doctor, Peter Levine, some of you may have heard. He's amazing work with children, and he studied animals in the wild. And he observed specifically polar bears, like if they had been shot at and they were traumatized, they would lie down on the tundra and they would do these huge sighs and shaking. And basically they were discharging their trauma from their bodies. And he saw that, and he brought that into his work as a neurological discharge from the nervous system, from the central nervous system. Any other ideas?
Weeping, crying.
Crying, absolutely, crying. You're sad, you cry.
Goosebumps.
Goosebumps.
How about peeing?
Well, peeing can be. It can be. If you're really nervous and it makes you want to pee, yes. Yes, again, it's a feeling and a thought that leads to a physical response. Can you go to the next slide? And this is my lovely illustration for you. Crying, sweating when you're nervous, goosebumps, smiling, increased heartbeat, and erection. That's another one. So we have to ask, so why does the body do this? It's so unconscious to us, but what is it? Well, actually, before that, I want to say it's also ubiquitous in our language. So we have metaphors all through our language about mind-body experience. So for the back and the neck, for example, can we go to the next slide? Shouldering responsibility, the weight of the world on my shoulders, pain in the neck. For our gut, go to the next slide, we think of the gut as the second brain. It's the center of processing and digestion. I can't stomach it. I'm sick to my stomach. This thing takes guts. The heart, it's the center of our the seat of our emotional life. My heart isn't in it. That breaks my heart. This warms my heart. And the skin is often referred to as some sort of irritation or impatience. Itching to say something. It gets under my skin. That makes my skin crawl. And I want to pause for a second because this, for me, the sort of sacred part of this work is this understanding that the brain has our best interest at heart. It's not, our bodies are not our enemies. Our bodies are the mouthpiece for the unconscious mind. And it's always working, the brain is always working towards homeostasis. Next slide. And homeostasis is survival, safety, and healing. The definition of homeostasis is the stable equilibrium between independent elements. And there's so many things that we're navigating every minute of our waking and sleeping lives because we have a lot of internal navigation that's happening. And the brain is trying to bring us into these areas of survival healing. That's trying to do that. So for example, shivering and shaking, as I explained with the polar bear, it's trying to release the trauma. Smiling is social bonding. That's bringing us into safety with one another. Sweating when we're nervous, our central nervous system is activated. We go into fight flight. The blood rushes from our limbs to our heart, and then we have to release the heat through sweat. The body's trying to, again, find equilibrium. And some people think that sweating used to be a sort of a chemical signal of danger for your friends. Sweaty palms. It's thought that maybe his palms get sweaty because you can grip things and help you grip. Blushing is a signal of remorse, and that builds trust. So pain is also a signal, and it signals tissue damage or threat. And next slide. You can sprain your ankle, you can get a virus and go to bed, you can stick your finger in a candle, and it's signaling to the body, well, sprain your ankle, well, don't walk on it. Stop, you have pain, so that you put your ankle up and it has time to heal. It's a helpful, pain is necessary, pain is helpful. Stay in bed, put your finger in a fire, okay, bandage it and don't go shovel manure with an open wound. So the brain is constantly, though, deciding what kind of pain, the quality of the pain, the duration of the pain, and whether to amplify or inhibit the pain. Next slide. So if you're being chased by a lion and you sprain your ankle, the brain has a decision to make between two bad options. It's going to give you pain, which you'll crumple from and get eaten by the lion, or it's going to hold off on the pain so that you can get away, and then it's going to give you the pain later. Which the brain does. And we hear these stories of people who have gone through great accidents, mothers lifting cars up off their children, the adrenaline rush. I mean, the body is capable of miraculous things where the brain shuts off the pain message so the person can survive. Again, that's one of the homeostasis, survival. Survival is always first. Next slide. What I'm trying to say is all pain comes from the brain. You have nociceptors that are in your finger when you put it in the candle, and those send signals through peptides up to the brain, and then the brain decides and sends signals back down to the finger. It feels like the pain is in your finger, but the pain is decided upon and generated in the brain. And next slide. This is just the bonus drawing that I had to make. There is a disease, and it's called congenital insensitivity to pain, where somebody is born and they can't feel pain. It exists. It's a real disease. And these people don't live very long because they feel invincible. And they cannot gauge what's safe, what's not safe for their bodies because they have no feedback system. So we think, oh, how great, no pain, but it's actually absolutely terrible. So the brain is the central command, and I want you to think of it like the projector, and then this is the screen. Or if you're a horseback rider, this is the horse, and this is the rider. You can have the best horse in the world, but if the rider doesn't know what they're doing, the horse is out of control. The conductor and the orchestra. Just different metaphors to help get this message through. Next slide. As I said, the body is the unconscious mind, basically. The mouthpiece of the unconscious mind. And so unlike the polar bear who can lie down on the tundra and discharge trauma, we humans live in this incredibly complex world. And there's many threats and subliminal threats, overt threats, conflicting or missing information or no information. We've got prolonged stress that puts our brains on a state of chronic alert. We have past illnesses or serious accidents where the brain got the message that it really wasn't safe and it just hasn't let that go yet. We've got deep inner conflicts with ourselves, and we've got relationship issues and, of course, politics and war. And in all of this, the perception of danger by the brain matters more than the actual danger. That's why you have two people standing side by side and one person's terrified and the next person isn't. It's the perception of danger by the brain. And I want to be clear, I'm using the word brain, not mind. And that is to take the stigma out of this experience. We have some control over this, which is why Dr. Ratner's system is so beautiful. But there's also such a thing as trauma, and trauma is something that, needs to be worked at through the unconscious mind, because a lot of the symptoms are expressions of what the unconscious mind is holding. Next. So to finish this section, all this pain, this mind-body pain, is real. So this is really important. You can have a gash in your leg that is bleeding, and you can have nothing at all that's visible or structurally visible on any imaging. The pain can be just as bad and just as real. It's very important. That is a very important piece, because validation, what my son did not get was validation of his experience. And it's not your fault. And I think I just talked about that. And the next one, you make sense and your symptoms make sense. And this is really the tenet of Dan's work. And I love this, and he brings it up all the time. Because the feeling of pain is completely overwhelming. It short circuits everything. You can't think straight. Nobody seems to understand, and you're in this agony, and you don't make sense to yourself, and it seems that nobody else understands either. So you make sense and your symptoms make sense. So that's the end of section 2, and we can have a little pause and have a cup of coffee, and then I'll continue. Okay, so Crushing Doubt. This is the name of Dr. Ratner's book. It's the name of his whole program, and I think you probably can tell it's a pretty clear double entendre. Doubt is crushing, and his system is designed to crush it. Okay, next slide. So just coming off of the last section, just to remind you, so the brain is responding moment by moment by moment by moment. We are moment-to-moment beings. We don't live, our brains do not respond 10 years ahead of time, a month ahead of, they're just responding every second to so many inputs. And that is actually a very hopeful thing, because what you think is chronic, again, don't like that word, but that's why I'm pointing it out, is actually not. If you can blush and it disappears in a second, you can have pain, and assuming it's not so simple, I don't want to make it sound super easy, but assuming you were able to change your brain and what it's thinking or feeling in a second, it could disappear just as quickly. Okay, next slide. Okay, so back to a story. I'm going to bring this back to Dr. Ratner. So I'm going to tell his story quickly. He was born in Cleveland, Jewish kid. His father died when he was 3, I think, young. He died when he was young. And his mother was a psychoanalyst, and his stepfather was also a psychoanalyst. So, there's a setup there. So he was 26, and he leaned over to tie his shoe, and he threw his back out. So, again, pausing on the language. First of all, anatomically, there's no such possibility. You cannot throw your back out. There is no such thing. Language-wise, it's similar to syndrome and chronic. It's dramatic, it's sentencing, and it's violent towards the body. And we have so many ways that we talk to our body that reinforce danger. You know, the danger, remember, the brain's trying to keep us safe. So if you're telling it you're not safe, it's going to fire as if it's not safe and give you possibly pain, right? You twist your ankle, you have pain, rest your ankle. That's how the brain is working. So he entered on an 8-year-long experience with chronic pain, persistent pain. And he was on disability. He was also suicidal. His psychoanalytic parents couldn't help him. He was in analysis himself, wasn't helpful, and he was desperate. And it wasn't until he discovered the work of Dr. John Sarno that things changed for him. So Dr. Sarno is a legend in this field. He was big during the 70s and 80s and into the 90s in Manhattan. He was an MD, and he was very science-based. So he did a lot of clinical studies, and he was very legitimate, and he cared a lot about the science behind this mind-body pain situation. So Dan discovered Sarno, and one of Sarno's biggest tenets, or what he posited, is that it's suppressed emotion that is the cause of a lot of back pain. His whole focus was on back pain and disc issues. And particularly, he focused on rage. Other emotions too, but rage had emerged for him as sort of the common theme for many people who were struggling with ongoing long-term back pain. And his studies revealed that imaging can be very obfuscating of the truth. So disc imaging, he did studies where he showed that people with a lot of pain, whose imaging showed stenosis, hemorrhage disc, ruptured disc, bulging discs, that this did not correlate necessarily with pain. He had people with terrible imaging who had no pain. He had people with no issues at all, with a lot of the similar pain. Now, when Dan picked up this book and read it, he observed right away his symptoms went down. So he saw a correlation, and he was a psychologist himself, so he was very interested in this, and he saw, oh my God, man. Now, he looked at the emotions part, and he tried to trace back from the beginning when he went to tie his shoe. And he realized what was going on in his life at that time, which was that he actually was, as I said, in psychoanalysis, and his therapist had said, I'm going on vacation. And he realized, having lost his father at age 3, that he had a lot of father longing, missing, feeling this huge deprivation of a male role model in his life. And just his therapist saying, I'm going on vacation, put him into this back syndrome situation. So that was an onset of a symptom, what he calls an onset, or later could be an uptick. And those are generally correlated to emotions. Dan, through all his work, and he's helped thousands of people, he started to understand that emotional events, emotional triggers are related to the onset and the uptick in symptoms, not necessarily the chronicity, not necessarily the long-term symptoms. And so he then started to develop his column system. Next slide. In the first column, he put emotions, as we described, Dr. Sarno's work. And then he realized, okay, I'm feeling better, okay, but I still am not great. I still have a lot of symptoms. And he realized, I have so many questions that I need answering. I have doubts, I have fears, I have missing information, I have uncertainty, I have confusion, I've been told this by this doctor, that doctor, and he decided to he set about resolving his questions. He interviewed people in the mind-body field, he did a lot of research, he went to see doctors, MDs, who could see his back pain through a mind-body lens. And with each question that he got answered, his symptoms were coming down. And he realized that it isn't only about the emotions, it's cognitive. It's about your questions, your unanswered questions, your fears, your uncertainty related to information. So he created his second column, which is doubt. He created the third column later when he was so much better and he was just basically healed, but he had these lingering, things that just wouldn't budge, symptoms that just wouldn't budge. And he realized then he had another story with his psychoanalyst where his psychoanalyst, he didn't really like him. They didn't click. And he'd been with him for 10 years. And his wife thought she should be seeing him. His parents thought he should be seeing him. He thought he should be seeing him. But the psychoanalyst was totally invalidating of all the progress he'd made. He didn't believe in it. He didn't believe in mind body. He was like, well, it's just good luck. You're better because it's good luck. And so one day, Dan fired him. And he stepped into his power. He realized he was not aligned with himself. And he took action on that, and he fired him. And these symptoms went down. And then he realized, okay, power is also very important. Okay, next slide. So, emotions, going back, just a little digging deeper into the columns. Emotions, these are some pretty strong emotions that we can have. The function of the symptom, let's say you have tennis elbow. I actually was preparing for my mother's 80th birthday during COVID, and it was super stressful because of COVID and secrecy, and she didn't know, and I was having a relationship struggle, and I was vacuuming my living room and tennis elbow. Boom. I didn't know any of this at the time, but I look back and I think that's what was happening. I was just in extreme stress. And it took me 2 years for this to resolve, this tennis elbow. So why? Why is the brain doing this? Going back to the why. And the reason is that sometimes, just like when you're running from a lion, the brain is deciding what do you need for survival. Sometimes emotions are just too hard to feel. They're just too heavy. And you have to live your life. You have to go to work, you have to take care of your kids. You can't necessarily go into a psychic break or have a breakdown. And the brain knows that. And it gives you a symptom because it's easier in the moment to deal with, your neck going out or something. So let's take an example. So there's this fictional woman, Sally. She's out in the winter, she's shoveling snow, and she pulls her shoulder. And she's like, anger, frustration. She can't go to work. She calls in and says, I can't come to work. Well, little does she put together, but that she's also getting divorced. Her husband usually shovels the driveway. Now she has to shovel the driveway. She is pissed off at him for a million other reasons, but also he's not shoveling the driveway. And her body basically is taking all of that rage and frustration and putting it into her shoulder. The other reason why the body would do that, the brain would do this in the body, is that it's a lot more acceptable to call into work and say, I pull my shoulder than it is to say, I'm in deep despair because my marriage is falling apart. So that's just a point to make. Next slide. The next column, doubt. Dan divides doubt into 4 types: questions, uncertainty, confusion, and fear. Now we have to have doubt in our lives the way we have to have pain. If you didn't have doubt, you wouldn't look 2 ways before crossing the street. You would just walk across. So you have a question, is the car coming? I don't know, I'll look. Okay, it's not, I'll walk across the street. So doubt is healthy when it's in the form of questions and uncertainty. But when it gets to the point of confusion and fear, the brain sort of short circuits and can't really think clearly. So Dan, in his story, remember he had all these questions. Am I going to be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 50? You know, am I ever going to be able to have children? Is what the doctor said true, that I am going to be permanently disfigured or whatever? You know, whatever the questions are. And as he started to resolve those by learning the nature of mind-body pain, his symptoms went down. So again, the question is why? Why is the brain doing this? Well, in the emotions column, remember, it's distraction. We're giving you a symptom to distract you from an emotion that is just too hard to feel in this moment. But in the doubt column, the function of the symptom is protection. So think of it like a helicopter parent. And the helicopter parent is like, don't eat that lollipop, don't play with her, she's a bad influence, don't pick up that toy, don't step in that puddle because it's got gluten in it or something. And so, you know, what it's doing, the parent is actually very well intended. They don't mean to be hurting their child, they're trying to protect their child. But it's too much, and the child ends up feeling scared. Well, this is what's happening in the body. The brain is trying to answer all these questions. It's coming up with all these questions. You know, what about this? What about this? And it's catastrophizing because it doesn't have accurate information, it has conflicting information, or it has no information. In the case of Zephyr, our son, we had no information. The doctors were not giving us any kind of referrals to this work. We didn't know. So that begets more symptoms. Okay, next. And in the power column, okay, just to review, in the emotions column, the function of the symptoms is distraction. I'm going slower so you can absorb. In the doubt column, the function of the symptoms is protection. And in this column, the power column, the function of the symptoms is communication. So when you get to that point where those niggly, nudgy symptoms just won't let go, he realized those symptoms are trying to tell you about how you're not aligned in your life. What's not working for you? So there's a lot to say about how this work is actually carried out when you're coaching somebody or in his groups, but I don't think we have a lot of time for that. So I just want to end this, and I can answer some questions, but I want to end it with 2 things. One, I want to read this sentence. Symptoms have a purpose. They're sending us information. By noticing which column a symptom belongs in and the timing of the symptom, we can better understand the message it is giving us. And next, I just want to end on this slide. The body is the most empathic entity. So much of this work is really not making our bodies broken. Don't use language like, I broke, something is broken in me, or something is pathologizing your body. What you want to do is look compassionately at what is it trying to say. It is impossible to know if you don't have some kind of structure to view it with, and that's the beauty of this column system. He gives a structure, he gives a framework, and he said, I didn't invent these columns, I just observed what is, and he created a framework for it. So, thank you.
This all translate for your son?
He he has slowly gotten better and better. He worked with Dan for a while, and then he didn't want to work with Dan. Everybody's different, you know, he had to find his own way. And right now, it's interesting, we talk a lot about what's going on for him. Right now, he's sort of not fixated on his pain here. Sometimes he still has it and it flares, but he's not focused so much. He's going to the gym. So one way to bring down your doubt in the doubt column, which is sort of the column which is on a low hum all the time. The emotions column work, you can sort of pull up big themes for yourself of what are your big emotional themes, so that when you have a spike or an onset, you can say, that's what's happening in my life. But with doubt, it's more of an ongoing situation. So with him, he's going to the gym. So he's testing his doubt. He's trying to prove or disprove his doubt that he's capable of going to the gym. And he's proving that he can go to the gym, and his symptoms are decreasing. So it's a feedback loop. Yeah. And he's also got some skin stuff that he's very worried about, but he sees what's going on. He sees the mind-body connection. So it's not giving him this existential crisis of everybody's crazy and I'm crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I made friends with my brain about 20 years ago. Because I had a lot of structural issues, and I let them sort of get the best of me. And then I realized that, I forget the moment that it happened, but I remember I was lying down somewhere and I had a pain, and I said to my brain, stop the pain. And I wasn't moving, I was just lying there, and it stopped. And that was the beginning of my really understanding how you can control. You know, my body's not going to get any better physically. It's just always going to be what it is. But to be able to tell it,
Yes.
or understand how to treat it through my brain has been miraculous.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
But it took me till I was in my 60s to figure this out.
Yeah, well, the information hasn't been available. And again, we live in a very Descartesian paradigm where people often think that this is woo-woo stuff and invalidate it and don't understand that this is actually really scientifically based.
My question is the mind and the brain.
Yes.
I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah. Well, it is a bit just semantics, but there are, again, language. It's all in your head, people will say, right? And in your head and in your mind aren't that far apart, as if you're making this shit up, right? So the brain includes the unconscious mind. The mind, sort of colloquially speaking, is really more the conscious mind. So there's a lot that's going on unconsciously that is enacted, is being held and expressed by our bodies. And the work is to bring it up to consciousness and relieve the body of the responsibility of having to show it to us in other ways. Does that make it clear?
And the mind is more behavioral, isn't it? Because you've heard the expression, mind your manners.
Oh, yeah.
Or mind your body, or mind your something.
Right.
Mind your business.
I mean, it's not to diminish the power of our conscious mind. In fact, what we're doing is collaborating and investigating our unconscious mind and how the body is holding that. Yeah. So they're all of a piece. You know, there's no distinction, but it's again sort of semantics. Yeah.
Is there anybody other than Dr. Dan doing this kind of work?
Absolutely, there's some amazing other doctors out there. It's a very small world, and what I love is they're really supportive of each other and really collaborative. So there's no competition there. I think there's some, he was talking the other day about, remember all the names for this? How there's some ego there and people get invested in different names and competing for what should we actually settle on. And his view is, who cares? Let's just focus on, you know, the content here. But yes, there's other really great doctors. I think Dan's system it's a very cognitive system. It's, there's a lot of somatic work. And actually, June, you did a lot of that work. And I want to just say something about that. Because I am a yogi and I love the body and everything, and I think you can find a lot of ways to communicate to the brain through the body, as long as you understand that the brain is the command. So you're using your body, you're getting into your body to soften it, to help it relax, to give it safety, so that then the brain understands it can continue that. So it's not exactly psychic. It's more psychosomatic, and I think it's important that the psycho is first, because the brain is at the control center. But it's wonderful work. There's so many ways to get to the same end, but I think having the understanding of how it works is important. Yeah.
So you're saying that you can do physical things, yoga, stretching, etc., that will help relax and soften, relax your mind rather, to enable the mind to do its work. Is that the...
Well, what's really interesting and why I love this column system is because it gives languaging to all of this. So, for example, one person might go to the gym and do or do a yoga class and come back injured. The next person might go to a yoga class and come back so relaxed. And the question Dan would ask is, did it spike your doubt or did it lower your doubt? Did the experience of doing yoga, was it soothing to you? Was it relaxing to you? Did it give your body a message of safety and comfort and ease and healing? Or were you trying to prove something like, oh, I've got to keep up with her because she's doing the splits and I can't, and then you're all in doubt and fear, and then suddenly you're hurt. So it's about what questions you're asking. It's not about what you're doing, it's what you're thinking while you're doing it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I could just make a comment.
Yes.
We talked earlier. I worked in doing ergonomics in California for 15 years, and it was working with people in computer workstations, nurses in a hospital, and so it was people in the workplace, and that whole experience is borne out in this, because you're working in a system that has laws. Everybody wants the right diagnosis, they want the imaging, otherwise the guy's a fraud, that kind of attitude. And the worker in the middle is in that dark space that you're talking about, between the practical black hole. And certain people, you could just tell, were going to suffer hugely. People with a little more awareness were a little less likely, but there were some people we meanly called ergonomic canaries in the coal mine, because they were just going to trigger like crazy. And the whole system, the language is so important. You've got the carpal tunnel diagnosis, you got this diagnosis. Oh, that's what I've got. And there are more than plenty of surgeons out there that are more than willing to take out your top rib to free up a thoracic outlet syndrome, rather than just some of the scenarios you talked about.
Some of the information, yeah. Right.
Yeah, I'm working with a woman who has psoriatic arthritis in her hands, and her doctor says this is incurable and degenerative. And now, it is a medical condition, psoriatic arthritis, but the language is like, really? Do you have to say that? I mean, we as beings are incurable and degenerative. We're all going to die. So why, Yeah.
Do you do any of your work remotely?
Yeah, I'm doing it all remotely. All of it. Yep. I find it a really good forum for me. In terms of the power column, for me personally, I find it's really nice. It's very boundaried to be on Zoom. It's very, and also this is not therapy. I just want to clarify, this is not therapy. as I said, it's quite a cognitive process. It's a psychoeducational process. It's not that emotions don't surface and we don't work with them, but we're really trying to surface them from the unconscious, bring them up to the conscious. We don't have to process them in a long time necessarily for the symptoms to release. So the goal is to bring down the symptoms. It's not to, completely recover from a trauma that you experienced. That's for a trauma therapist. So, yeah.
So I just wanted I love this, but I was thinking about, I don't know if you heard of Peggy Huddleston, the Peggy Huddleston method. When I went into surgery several years ago, I was told about this nurse who noticed that when people go into surgery, they are in fear, they're in anxiety, they're scared, and then they contract. And when they come out of the surgery, they are in a lot of pain. So she created this methodology where you basically visualize yourself coming out of the surgery, feeling good, etc. And what you do is you tell the doctor and the anesthesiologist to please, when you are going under, would you please repeat these 3 affirmations loudly? So I did this, and they said, Amber, I will heal beautifully. Amber, there will be no pain. Amber. And when I came out of it, there was no pain. So that was a mind.
Yes, absolutely.
The mind was being,
Absolutely.
before I went down. So this is a method I think, I just think everyone should know about, because it really is.
Well, I have some regrets, actually, remorse, maternal remorse about our son when he went into surgery, because I didn't know this, and he went in with a lot of fear. And he came out exactly what you said. And actually, there's a Stanford anesthesiologist who specializes in exactly how to prepare people for anesthesia, because the condition that you're in when you're under is very related to the speed of your healing when you're out. It's very directly correlated. Yeah.
Just one of the things that didn't get discussed here today, though, is how important breathing is.
Yes.
In all of this.
Yes.
Because breathing can push pain away. Breathing
Yes.
is
Again.
powerful stuff. I mean, conscious
Yeah.
breathing, not just,
Yes.
I'm breathing because I'm breathing. But I found it really powerful to push away anxiety.
Yes.
When you've been injured, you tend to protect yourself as you're moving along.
Yes.
And you tighten. And that makes things worse.
Yes.
And that's part of that is anxiety.
It's the brain is trying to help you, and sometimes that tightening has a function, right?
You think it's protecting.
Well, it is protecting you sometimes. Like, if you have a car accident and you go into deep breathing and relaxation, meanwhile the police are there and everything's happening, you gotta cope, you gotta function. So the brain is actually harnessing certain ways of navigating the crisis in the moment. But then that lodges, right? And the brain maintains that alert system, and that's where breathing can be so useful. Absolutely, it's a great tool. And it's basically bringing you into your sympathetic nervous system, out of the fight, flight, freeze. Yep. Yeah.
I'm curious about if he is aligning this work with the aging process itself.
Yeah, well, when pulling up the themes, because when doing the emotions column work, what we're doing is trying to establish 6 to 12 big emotional high stakes themes that kind of run through your life. And he starts with the question, what really bothers you? And that's where you kind of elicit, what really bothers me? And to articulate those in words that are perfect for the person, because it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, it's what the person feels. And if every word has to land. What was the question again?
Aging process.
Oh yeah, so one of the themes that can come up is aging, like fear of aging. And his phrase is, aging is enraging.
I mean, I'm finding it so.
So, yeah, I mean, that is absolutely a very, I mean, it's both doubt and emotion, actually. It's all mixed up together. And again, it's the articulation of the fear can sometimes bring it up out of that subliminal place where it's working on you and you're not really like acknowledging it and allowing yourself to have some compassion for yourself and understanding the natural cycles and sort of seeing it from a more of a lens of life and forgiveness and process. It's that niggly doubt brain and the society that's telling us that aging is evil. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But just want to say that aging is not correlated to pain. Super important. You can be old and have miserable arthritis and have no pain. Pain is not correlated with osteoarthritis. That's not necessarily true of psoriatic and rheumatoid arthritis, but osteoarthritis, like Ben had, no, I mean, that doesn't necessarily correlate to pain. So, you can get old and you have wrinkles, everything's sagging and bone loss and all that stuff, but you don't necessarily have to have a lot of pain. So, yeah. Hmm.